Today we're going to be learning different watercolor techniques. The first technique I want to show you is called wet on wet. To do wet on wet, you have to make your paper really wet with clean water. Make sure your paintbrush and your water is completely clean before you do this. After your paper is really wet, take your watercolors and add them to areas of the wet paper. You will see the colors spread out and flood the wet area of the paper. Try using different colors or moving the water around to make the colors blend. When you have it the way you like it, make sure to keep your paper flat. Next, we're going to use salt to make our watercolors look really cool. Just like with the wet on wet, make sure to paint your paper with a lot of really wet watercolor paints. After you have a nice puddle of paint, use a little bit of salt, put it in the palm of your hand, and sprinkle it on top of the paint. It doesn't look like much now, but let me show you how it looks once it's dry. As you can see, it created these really interesting light areas. It kind of looks like flowers or blooms across the paint. Next, we're going to use a paper towel to soak up some of the painted area. So I'm going to paint my whole paper, making sure my paints are nice and wet. Then I'm going to take my paper towel to gently lift some of the paint off of the area I have painted. This is a great way to make clouds or even remove an area that you painted that you don't like. And the last technique I want to show you is called crayon resist. To create a crayon resist, the first thing I need to do is draw on my paper. I can use any crayons, but my favorite is the white crayon. Watch what happens when I paint over crayon with watercolor. The crayon shines through, especially the white or yellows, and you can see everything that you've already drawn. It's kind of like magic. Next, we have a new material, watercolor pencils. Watercolor pencils are so fun because it's combining colored pencils with watercolor. Make sure the pencils you're using are the watercolor pencils. They'll say watercolor on them and might even have a picture of a paintbrush. Regular colored pencils will not say watercolor on them. There are lots of fun ways to use watercolor pencils, but I'm just going to show you a quick overview now. I like to call this way just watercolor pencil sketching. So for this, you would just draw out the outlines of a simple picture. So I'm just going to do some leaves here. If I don't want the watercolors to shine very brightly, I can draw lightly. But if I want the colors to be really bright, I need to push down hard. After I've sketched out my picture with my watercolor pencils, I can use just water, not even paint, and color inside of the area. The water will pull the color out of the pencils and fill in the area. I think it looks pretty great. Something not to do with watercolor pencils is to draw things that are too small. If the colored area is too small, the water doesn't have enough space to flood in and everything will just blend together. So I just want to show you a little bit more things you can do with watercolor pencil before we end this video. If you color in a large area and paint over it, the colors will just blend and look really nice. You can color different colors next to each other to make the colors flow into each other. This might take some playing around, and you might want to play with going from different directions to get the colors to go back and forth. Feel free to have a day where you just practice before you start any pieces of artwork with it. One thing you need to be really careful about with watercolor pencil is it's really hard to keep colors separated from each other. So if I wanted one heart to be purple and the other heart to be pink, and I immediately painted them next to each other, the colors are not going to have a sharp edge between the two of them. Instead, you might want to let the first color dry before painting the second color. Also, the lighter you color with your pencil, the less bright the color will be when you use your water on top of it. You might want to have your own water cup when using watercolor pencils so your water doesn't get too dirty too quickly. Either way, have a lot of fun playing with watercolors.